find those experimenters who are already on the team and create the space that nurtures them, and then distribute their insights to the team at large and invite additional perspectives. It is the kind of thing that gives such powerful demonstration to people that they have the liberty to do that tinkering on their own. Another thing that I think that leadership often gets wrong is starting with, let's bring in, basic training for every single employee, because if folks don't have the mindset to get experimental or to try something for the first time when it's really awkward, regardless of how much training you give them, that training's never going to get put to use, especially once the training becomes obsolete.
Welcome back to the Meg and Amy Show. Thank you so much for the support for our show. Please do like and subscribe and add comments. We would love to hear from you and what you'd like to see more of on the show. Today we are interviewing Seth Wylie, AI transformation expert. Seth is always chasing the next aha moment for himself and for others. He thrives by bringing people together to imagine and pilot new ways of working, and leans on a blend of analysis, enthusiasm, and creativity to create psychological safety and momentum. This passion, along with a shocking number of hours spent with ChatGPT, led him to his 6th role at Gainsight as the principal of enterprise AI transformation, where he has worked to empower teammates with the skills and inspiration to embed AI in their everyday work. Seth is now an independent operator, helping teams to foster that AI mindset in their own organizations. He has managed teams in community, CS operations, support, and services, and co-chaired Gainsight's employee resource group for mental wellness. He lives in Boston with his husband and their very opinionated beagle. Welcome, Seth.
Thank you so much, Amy. Glad to be here.
We're going to talk about lots of meaty topics today, but before we do, I understand that you have been doing acapella singing for decades. Is that correct? Tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, at some point you do something for long enough that you realize maybe I'm going to just always be doing this. So I probably started in 7th grade or so, where there was an acapella group from some nearby college that came and performed in my middle school. And there's some things in life you see and you're just like, I would like to do that. So I had to wait all the way till high school until I actually got into an acapella group. But since 1997, I've been in groups continuously. And my current group I've been in we're almost 20 years old now. And I was one of the founding members.
So what's your favorite song to acapella to?
Oh, goodness. It changes over the years. The quintessential characteristic of a song is it's got to have like a great bop. I can't be able to resist moving on stage with it. So one of the ones, for example, that we do right now that's a great version of that is "Accidentally in Love." That's on the Shrek soundtrack.
You do the dancing with it and everything too?
We stay away from choreography because that's a level of commitment that we are not prepared to. It's not our particular flavor of artistry.
Wasn't it Andy on The Office that was the a cappella group?
Yes, at Cornell, in fact.
At Cornell, that's right.
Yeah. So would you sing us a line from Accidentally in Love?
Well, that's not my solo, but I can sing a different solo. My solo is Misty Mountains from The Hobbit. Oh, misty eye of the mountain below, keep careful watch of my brother's souls. And if the sky should be filled with fire and smoke, keep watching over Durin's sons.
Wow.
I'm tingling. My whole body's tingling. My dad's 80th birthday is coming up, and I wrote him a song with Claude, and then I had it made in Suno, and it's really pretty crappy. Do you think you could redo it for me?
For my grandmother's 70th birthday, I rearranged "Jesse is my friend. Yeah, no, he's been a good friend of mine."
Jesse's girl. My husband wants to know, when is Jesse going to get over it?
Yeah. So I rearranged that song to be about my grandmother, and then I taught my family to sing it a cappella at her 70th birthday party, which was a little bit chaos, but it worked out in the end.
Wow. Yeah, that's well above my pay grade. Yeah.
You don't think you could recruit your family, Amy?
I don't think I could recruit myself. But that's awesome. And so you went from and continue to do acapella to being obsessed with transformation and AI, being what I'd call a transformation artist. How did that come about?
The as many careers are, long and windy path. I have been at Gainsight for 7 years and had 6 roles in that time. So I came in when I had gotten into customer success operations work. And so I have always liked thinking about what's going on inside someone's head. What is the system of thoughts that's happening? I was a cultural anthropology major in college, so that there's something there about what's the internal, what does someone need internally in order to operate at their best? And so in a customer success operations space, that's about figuring out what's the operational atmosphere that they need to be in, what kind of guidance, what kind of tools, and also for the leaders themselves. Like, how do you step back from the day-to-day and have the thoughtful conversation about the actual system of our customer success practice or so on? So anyway, so I did that at Gainsight for a number of years, and then I moved into running our customer success operations community. So looking outward from Gainsight, how do we help CS ops people to be effective in their roles by helping them connect with each other? And then that led into running our own community team. And then that led into how can we use community differently in our own interactions with our customers. And as I was working with that kind of customer success innovation type work, ChatGPT happened. So I was much like with Acapella in middle school. I was like, I would like to do more of this. So my role quickly shifted in that direction until it shifted all the way into the IT department. And so I've been bringing this mix of thinking operationally and thinking with a community mindset, and bringing it to my enthusiasm and interest around AI to help people figure out how can this tool basically help them think in a novel operational way about whatever it is that they want to do in their work, or do outside of work. I think that there's just so much latent power there, but that no one can tell you what you most want to get better at. So I appreciate bringing that almost artistic lens, as you called out, to helping people feel into what is the domain in which they feel the greatest opportunity for betterment, growth, greater efficiency, greater speed, greater quality, whatever it looks like, and figuring out how AI can help them in that, because I can't tell them. They can only tell themselves.
I love that. I love how you're listening to sort of a opportunity to bring collective intelligence together to think about how transformation happens. That kind of wisdom of the crowds plus the nudging into a future space, I think, is something that we absolutely need more of. What I'm curious about is, what tools have you developed in this process of kind of sussing out signal, right? Because back to your point about there's an individual element of transformation and change that comes from within. But within communities, there's also sort of that sort of energy bubbling up. So what tools have you developed in yourself in sort of finding where that signal is and where you think it needs to be nudged to get to optimal results in this world?
That's a grand threshold to cross, but we'll see if we can get there. So the first thing that I did when I started doing this work was I knew that there are people out there experimenting like I was, because I had run across them already. I'd seen them react to my messages in Slack, what have you. So the first thing I knew was I have to connect these people together. Like, I just need to create some kind of environment where they are inspired to come to the table and start to talk with each other. And so in that case, I themed it around James Bond. It was called MI6, M-AI6. It was a little community of folks. You could be a 00 agent who was interested in sort of the adoption type stuff, or you could be in the Q branch, the sort of skunk works of tinkering. But just giving people that, raising that lightning rod, or rallying flag or what have you, for them to come to a space where they could compare notes. That ended up not lasting in terms of momentum for very long, but it was effective in that it connected me with these people to start with and got the conversation going. The next thing that I did was building out a broader community, so less focused on the enthusiasts, more of a come one, come all, for anyone at Gainsight who was interested in having these conversations about AI. So it's gone through a few different names, but currently calling it AI Club. And it is 90 minutes every Friday, and there are people who actually stay for the full 90 minutes. There are people who have joined while on PTO because they say this is just like a fun conversation to have. And I've tried to give it a structure before. I've tried to say, like, this week, let's talk about this topic or what have you. But it always feels like it ends up shutting down the conversation. It slows down the room. And the only question that I need to ask to get the conversation going is, what have people been experimenting with AI this week? And what have you been using it for, even if it's something you've kind of always been using it for? Because if someone says what they've been working on, you can guarantee that there's someone else in the room who says, ooh, that's interesting, or that relates to something that I've been doing, and maybe that gives me a new idea, or I've never heard of that tool. Tell me more about what that is. And all these things just layer on top of each other, especially when the tools are changing every single week, if not more quickly than that. So that has connected me to the signal, but it's still very messy. It's still a lot of like, okay, no, this is going on over here. This person mentioned this team is doing this thing. I should figure out who to connect with on that team to learn about that project, what have you. So it's plugging me into the signal. The surfacing it to leadership, I have run into, the biggest trouble I run into there is that leadership is very distracted by the many things that are going on. And my latest thinking on that is, how do you create compelling moments that are the moment where leadership says, like, okay, this is the moment where I'm going to tune into AI. So there are a number of companies that have used hackathons to great effect, and they have a few different effects, such as actually developing prompts or agents or workflows, what have you, using AI, or giving people the sense that they have permission to use AI to invent in this way. But the third thing that hackathons do, and I have not run one personally, it's not something I've had a chance to do with Gainsight, but the third thing that they do is they give leadership that moment to pay attention. Because whatever the thing is that surfaces up, at least leadership is getting some sense of getting plugged into it. And I think it's just much harder to do that on a constant basis, except for those leaders who are very personally tied in and personally experimenting and personally interested in engaging in those conversations. But I found that those are few and far between when the rubber meets the road and they're, they hit their inbox in the morning.
There was an article in the Times recently about how, executive teams are so distanced from AI tools because a lot of like what actually helps you do your work makes more sense at, kind of lower ends of the hierarchy, whereas, executives are often in a lot of meetings and doing approvals and making decisions and stuff like that. So there, in the Times, it was talking about how there's been a little bit of a surge of having like special offsites where CEOs bring folks in to share what they're doing with the executive team to get them excited and that sort of thing. And this seems to fit a little bit into your framework of, hey, this isn't about mandating AI training for people. This is about really changing mindsets more foundationally. So what do you think, like, what are companies getting wrong now, and what's the opportunity to bring this not just to, the people, but even to executive teams?
There's an order of operations thing here. There's like 100 carts and 100 horses, and they're all kind of in a jumbled order at every single company. Partly what folks are getting wrong is not realizing that the experimentation is already going on their team and that it can be harvested already. let alone if they have some folks working on the case to foster it and actively create environments where that kind of experimentation and development of use cases can happen on its own. Another thing that I think that leadership often gets wrong is starting with that training, starting with like, let's bring in, basic training for every single employee, because if folks don't have the mindset to get experimental or to try something for the first time when it's really awkward and they feel like they're wasting time, any of us doing anything for the first time, or the first several times, you waste ton of time. It's not efficient. It's the natural curve of a growth curve. And so if you have a space where people feel under pressure to hit their metrics, hit their customer calls, pump out the amount of content they're supposed to produce, the amount of code that they're supposed to produce, but then you say, and also please slow down and learn how to do this new thing in an awkward way, regardless of how much training you give them, that training's never going to get put to use, especially once the training becomes obsolete, which will happen in 3 months or so when there are new models or new tools that are worth experimenting with, or when their colleagues said, hey, I did this really impressive thing, you should try it. If they don't have the mindset to try it, then they won't. So the first thing that I think that companies need to do is to find those experimenters who are already on the team and create the space that nurtures them, and then put them on, not put them on a pedestal because that sounds so official, and that intensity can shut down the playful experimentation, the sense of I can mess around and try something new and it's not going to be judged, but to distribute their insights to the team at large and invite additional perspectives. And I think the training then comes in later, once there's enough of that energy and momentum and social proof in order for the training to actually get used. And that social proof, to your point, Amy, needs to come from the executives. And I think it needs to come not just in lip service, but in executives literally demonstrating what they're doing. At Gainsight, our CEO, Nick, has been an incredible leader in that respect. In many respects, and in that one in particular, because he uses AI not just for work things, although he uses extensively for having conversations about challenges and questions that he's asking himself about the work that he's doing, but also because he uses it to write poetry or reflect on, like coach him on his poetry writing, and to talk with it about astronomy, and physics.
Either one is good. Either one is good.
The cosmos.
So he's using AI as a thought partner
Yes.
from a work perspective.
And he's being public about it. And not like sharing all of the chats necessarily, but being very explicit about what's happening. And that type of leadership is rare, I think, at Gainsight and in general. But it is the kind of thing that gives such powerful demonstration to people that they have the liberty to do that tinkering on their own.
Yeah, a couple things that I've seen, and so I just want to come back to your like compelling moments and how to build confidence and spark at the executive team to help support the people that are experimenting and trying and having a lot of interest but not a lot of clarity. I wrote a little bit about this, where I feel like similar to you, a lot of people have started with fluency training and without context or alignment. And I think that the same thing is true in the gap between executives and people on the ground that are doing work, and how those things are disaggregated. And it's really because the context, the translation between the problems that an executive wants to solve and the problems that an individual want to solve, you often need some translation layer between those two for people to see that those are exactly the same problem, because they show up differently and they have maybe different language and certainly different priority pivot points. And so a couple things that I have seen that I find really impressive. So back to your sort of hackathon or bringing together a compelling moment. I was really impressed with a post from Jake Sapir at Emergence Capital, where he talked about their VC firm did an offsite where they first started with getting aligned on what are some of the big things they would like to be easier that would be compelling for the group. And then they created space for experimentation, as well as bringing some mentors and coaches to help people get more hands-on and get more grounded. So I think that the real insight for me is that this is actually the same as any transformation. It needs to be broken down into a space where people can understand the what and then the how, as opposed to just starting with the how and not really having clarity of the what, because otherwise they'll be really proud of something, but it will not be compelling to the leadership who they want to be impressed with their work, or whom they want to find a way to make things better. And so building that both common language and that shared empathy and that clarity for where value emerges, where learning emerges, where capability emerges, and where value emerges. I think those are big things. I know, Amy, you had some of that at Success Factors as well.
Yeah, and so Seth, do you how do you connect those dots, right? In terms of what people are doing on the ground and what's going to be interesting to executives. Like I know you and Nick have talked about the writing and executive styles and that sort of thing. Is that the best example? Or, how do you create that connection that Meg's talking about?
I think that training AI to speak in the voice of your executives so that your team can write pretty good ghost notes for your executives it's a little bit cutesy. It's also effective. And it's got this kind of like network effect thing of you're using it for communication, and that's great. The broader system I would suggest for helping make that communication is the kind of before and after. Like without AI, it took me this much time to do this thing, or I was not able to do this thing, or I did this thing in a way that was not as effective. Whereas with AI, I'm now able to do it faster, better, and so on. So for example, customer success is where I'm most familiar with. So pulling an example from there, we at Gainsight have created a value framework that describes the ways that our product provides value to our customers. Here are the different metrics. If you can use Gainsight to improve your retention, you can use Gainsight to improve your expansion, you can use Gainsight to improve customer sentiment, what have you. And these are the metrics that are associated with them. Here are the workflows that are associated, et cetera. That's very useful for us. When we're talking with our customers, who are also customer success teams, they don't always have value frameworks of their own. But if they did, they would have a better idea of how to interact with their customers. Sorry, everything at Gainsight with customer success is very like layers of the onion. It's all very meta. If we could help our customers better articulate their value framework, then they would have an easier time using our tool, because they would know what to use it for when communicating with their customers. And that would be standardized and so on. So one of our CSMs said, well, I could probably create a value framework for customer X. She, did a little bit of web research using an AI tool. She plugged it in with her call transcripts, and lo and behold, it gave them a 80% good, 20% manual effort needed at the end, start on their way to thinking about their value framework. And talk about, there's like levels of value there. Firstly, giving them the value framework that they can use to figure out how to use Gainsight better. Number two, strong relationship builder with our CSM. Like what an incredible sort of trusting relationship you would have with someone who puts enough thought into, even if they're using AI to do it, you're truly what you need in order to do your work well. Thirdly, that CSM now feels like they're like a boss. They're like, the fact that they can do that for a customer and do it with a larger book of business of customers than they had before. This one CSM I'm talking about, her book of business went up by 50% maybe 6 months ago, and she's been able to do this kind of work for customers because of AI, and not just they're not just own more customers, but also do this kind of work for them. So that kind of story, bringing that to executives, I feel like it does a couple of things. One, they could zoom in on, okay, specifically value frameworks, that's good. We can offer that to our customers. Let's train all of our CSMs to do that. But also, because it's an anecdote, it comes prepackaged with this sense of like, but this is just one example of all of the different ways that it could be used. And I think it also comes prepackaged with a sense of, this CSM just figured this out. Like, in a way, it's not rocket science, but in a way, it required creativity and a deep understanding of what the customer actually needed. And so that has this sense of, what we need is our CSMs to be inventing the moments or noticing the moments where AI can help, and have a rich enough personal understanding of the toolbox of AI tools that are available to them, that they can snap them together to create the little like Lego kit that is appropriate for this situation to do this thing that gives that customer more value. The issue is that it's so hard to put an ROI number on that.
So in this example, how did Gainsight then nurture and foster this particular invention and creativity, and specifically the executive team? Like, how did this work from that perspective? Did this CSM get put on a pedestal? What happened?
Honestly, I don't think we did. I think we missed that. The way that I've been, so the reason I learned about this is because it came up at AI Club. And to my point earlier about like, this is like, I'm detecting the signal, but it's messy. So at the end, after these 90-minute calls, I go on Slack and I post the call summaries, the sort of key takeaways for folks so that everyone gets some access to it. And there are things like this where people have posted something similar in like the CSM channel, for example, and gets lots of reaction in Slack. There are a threaded message afterwards, including our VP of CS and our CCO saying like, this is amazing, everyone should do this. But it kind of stops there because it's hard to have these moments to boil up. And honestly, I think that there's a way that I could do this. I could have approached this better, and that any AI transformation leader could approach this better, which is truly becoming a champion and advocate for every single one of these use cases. Because it's hard for a CSM or for anyone to say, I did this thing, look at me, I'm amazing. Let me tell my boss's boss's boss how amazing I am. And some people are relatively comfortable doing that or have a relationship where they can. But for me, in this sort of third-party role based on the IT team and so on, to come in and raise it on the flagpole and say, everyone look at this thing, I think that would have helped. I think it is easy for someone in my seat to get deer in the headlights, because that was not the only thing that came up on that call. It was one of 30 things. So the degree of filtering and thoughtful sort of shunting things to the right executive and so on is requires a degree of confidence and executive presence and just sense of, this matters, even in a world where executives are in general so distracted by their day-to-day jobs, to be able to stand up and say, hey, executive, stop and listen. This thing is great. That is a degree of the particular flavor of chutzpah that I have not brought to servicing things up to the executive team.
What you're doing is kind of this groundswell of changing mindsets, of getting people to share, and this is so important. So Meg and I have been looking at like, how can we change like organizational structures and accountability to better like create these connections. So I'm just going to ask Meg now, what do you think would be a good way to kind of structure some of the organizational ownership in order to make the
the wheat from the chaff?
The wheat from the chaff. Yeah. What do you think, Meg?
So it's interesting. Daniel Pink today posted a thing that reminded me of the importance of progress towards the sense of well-being and accomplishment and motivation of individuals. And he recommended that what we need to start formulating are progress rituals that highlight and focus on progress. So starting with that, and I think you nailed it, Seth, that there was an opportunity that you exploited this much that probably should have been exploited even more in this, and still could be. And I think that as I look at the need within organizations, I feel like we observe the need for a couple things. You need expertise, right? You need to have people that have, been at this a little bit longer and have the kind of artist mindset that you have, Seth, that think about the art of the possible and that can really look at opportunity different. You need organizational through line connectivity and connective tissue. And to me, I think that you need a couple things to make that really strong. Number one is to get really good signal on where the organization would be looking for the most value, right? What are the things that are going to have an outsized attention grabbing, and for which groups, right? So maybe even just like thinking in terms of which functional groups need which kind of proof points, and really spend some time. And maybe this is a place where AI as a thought partner could be really helpful in the same way that your example was like helping define the value of customer success, spending the time. What is the value for the CFO? What is the value for the head of operations? What is the value for head of product and engineering? What is the value for the person in charge of revenue and marketing, et cetera? Really getting them to articulate what are their goals for the year, what are the value points, and where are they struggling to achieve, whether it's because of a market or whether it's because of internal budget or whatever it is. Everybody's got their lists. Soliciting that piece up front, getting alignment on where the business will have the most elasticity for investment in AI, like which things value points. So instead of just thinking universally in ROI, like where would the business feel compelled to invest, and where would it be happy if something emerged but maybe wouldn't invest in it? So then you have that context to feed in from the AI club, so that as things emerge, you can start to categorize it. And again, AI tools could probably help with this very well, to say, hey, this is an antidote that ties to retention, new sales, customer growth, et cetera. This is an antidote that ties to efficiency, cost savings, time to, resolution, whatever. This is an antidote that just speaks to improving employee engagement, or injecting some fun into the organization, et cetera, so that you're getting good at capturing these progress points, even when they're emerging, and getting good at redirecting them back to people to, again, facilitate more innovation. Because the thing is that right now it's the abstraction that kills everyone. You end up with these tools, they can do anything, they could be anything. So that becomes very hard for people to understand. But the minute you bring it down to, here's an example of something that has been done, most people can look at an example and say, well, that looks kind of similar to this other thing, or this example is terrible for this, and this reason. To, exploit the internet hack of how to learn how to do anything is to tell people how to do it wrong. And so again, these are the places where you can bring this forward. And you can do this, again, in any organization structure, although I do have some thoughts about what might be emerging in that space.
Oh my goodness. Another intellectual ambush by Meg.
I was living for it though.
Goodness.
So
you were ready for it?
I was just wrapped. I think, one aspect of it that made me think of, Meg, is how much to executives this might look like opportunism or feel like opportunism, in a healthy way, where something bubbles up and you have to be ready to snag it and say like, that's a great thing. I don't want to throw someone under the bus, but I'm going to do it in an anonymous way. There was a person at Gainsight just a couple days ago who slacked me and his manager and I think the head of security, basically saying like, here's a cool tool for spreadsheets. Can we use this? And his manager, I wanted to recommend it to my team that I manage. And he kind of already had to say like, go experiment with this thing. And the manager rightly said, well, have you tried yet Gemini built into Google Sheets? I haven't tried it myself, but I understand that, it's there and we should use the tools we already have. And so that person's response in that thread, referring to the note that they had sent to their team, was just deleted. Like, fine, this has like been snipped in the bud. And so this sense of like, is that person going to suggest something again? Are they going to suggest to their team to tinker with something? Maybe the same amount of likelihood, but probably less. And that was just like the perfect opportunity for the senior leader to say, tell me more about this.
Tell me more is always a good thing to say.
Yeah. Or like, maybe this is my moment to try Gemini and Google Sheets for the first time and just for 5 minutes get a feel for it. And I feel for that senior leader because it caught them unawares. They are dealing with 500 other things and so on. But it strikes me that sense of getting, like noticing these little like glimmer moments and taking those as the chance to dive in, that might be what it feels like to a leader that's used to being 3 to 6 levels removed from the operational details. But with AI, we're talking about operational day-to-day life. So you have to take those moments to really engage with your team in that kind of, in a way that feels more like up to your elbows in it than your typical interactions.
So before we wrap, I have one more question. So you have called yourself a mad scientist tinkerer and a village elder. And so putting on both of those hats, what is your absolute favorite tool right now that you would, as an elder, recommend to us based on all of your tinkering?
Let me talk about the way that I've used AI most personally, which is to uncover more knowledge about myself. To say, here's how I interact in these situations. What's going on there? And or to say, give it a call transcript and say, how did I show up in this call differently than the other people on this call that I might not even have noticed? And its ability to surface those subtleties, it can overblow it. It can get carried away. But there are nuggets of truth in there. And the more of those that you accumulate together, the better that AI can serve you if you tell it that information about yourself. So I have that. I've also for a long time been reading books basically about like how to live life well, from Elizabeth Gilbert and Jill Bolte Taylor and Martha Beck and others. Some just like incredible authors. And so I've accumulated, but even starting before AI, this like compendium of little tidbits of what I believe it looks like to live life in a way that's very like compelling and alive and so on. So I've put all of that into a ChatGPT project in a document that is currently 95 pages long, which seems wild, but I've been building it over the course of years. It's a collection of little notes in Apple Notes that eventually got put together. Plus it has, one other thing to add. I recently came into possession of all of my childhood report cards going back to preschool. And it's very interesting to see who you were before achievement culture got a hold of you. And so anyways, all of this goes in, and being able to come to that and ask a question like, I'm going to be on a podcast. Like, what would it look like for the best of me to show up on this, and to get its insight? So I mentioned this whole story for 2 levels, on 2 levels. One is helping AI to understand you and using AI to understand yourself better so you can tell AI about yourself like as a whole thing that's wonderful. And regardless of whether you're doing that, creating a like information ecosystem in a ChatGPT project or a Claude project or a Gemini Gem or whatever the thing looks like, that understands a domain of information and saying, like, here's all the information about our podcast. Here's the tools that we use. Here's what we want the podcast to be. Here's the list of our previous folks, and here are my our previous guests, and here are my reflections on each of those episodes about what we did well and what I wish we could have done better, and so on. If all of that was in a ChatGPT project, you could go to it and get such rich advice on how you wanted to show up, or you could come to it with things like, I'm feeling a little tired today, like what should I focus on doing during this next call? So whether it's ecosystem about a podcast or about yourself or about a particular customer you're working with or what have you, the main advice I would give to people is to nurture that ecosystem of knowledge somewhere in one of these tools, so that it can be your thought partner for anything related to that.
Yeah. I've been using Claude for a while, and I just discovered projects this week. I'm kind of embarrassed to say, and it's been life-changing, to be honest, because I kept like running into the thing that says, this conversation has been too long, start over. And I'm like, oh my God, but I've lost all of this stuff, and now I don't have to lose it. So
Hey, can we just like take a half a click here to congratulate and celebrate your mother for saving all of your report cards throughout high school? I don't know about Amy, but I don't think I could hold that bar. Did you have any siblings? Are you an only child, or?
I have an older sister. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so 2 kids, and you're the youngest, and she still managed to have all your report cards. Like, yeah, well done.
Yeah, you have a more enthusiastic reaction about it than my husband did. It's like, why are these in our home?
Did he insist that they get put into the project and then thrown away?
He was fine with whatever I did with them, as long as I think that they were out of the way or something. There was also a substantial amount of kindergarten art and other things, which was pleasant to look at, like all the old yearbooks, all that stuff. It just like all got put into a box. So it was fun in a way to go through, but yeah, taking some photos and disposing of the rest ended up being also a cathartic experience. I like the comment from my second grade speech pathologist, where I couldn't say my R's. I just said everything with so her note was, I keep reminding Seth that it's not necessary to talk so loudly in this very small room. The suggestion lasts for several minutes. Like, it's little tidbits you get from your childhood.
Well, thank you so much, Seth. This has been a great joy. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for the song.
You're our first song.
Hopefully not your last. No, thank you so much for the conversation. I love geeking out about this stuff, and really appreciate doing it with thoughtful, experienced people. So yeah, thank you so much for the chat.
Okay, Meg, it's time for Leadership Corner. You ready?
You bet. Let's do
All right,
this.
Here we go. I am getting conflicting advice. On the one hand, should I be diving into AI tools to role model behaviors for my people? Or should I stay back, be patient, and let them mature first? What do you two think?
Wow, this is an interesting one because it trips a little bit into my own sort of behaviors as well. So it's very hard for me not to try to get more context myself, and so jumping in is my first instinct. But stepping back a little bit as to kind of like what I think matters. I think getting clarity for yourself about how AI impacts your job and your people's job is important. You can do that by being hands-on. You can do that by being more curious and sitting down with people and having them show you things that they're doing. You can do that by, doing some outside training or whatever. But I think getting personalized context with anything that you're going to do as a change within your business is important, because without that context, you're going to struggle to have the most important thing that you need as a leader, which is judgment, right? Having some clarity of judgment. And the context here is so pivotal and so different that I think that matters. I think the other thing is that as much as modeling your own use or practice of AI, modeling the curiosity and the interest in learning is critical to helping other people, because the path of learning is you're usually bad at something at first. And it is in the being bad at it that you build a little bit more empathy, you just become a little bit nicer person, and you then understand when and how to be patient, but also when and how to push, because just being patient is a really big risk, because there's a lot of fear. Nobody likes to be bad at something. Nobody likes to look dumb. So going first in the role modeling of being a little bit lost, being curious, being willing to acknowledge what you don't know, I think really matters. So I don't know that that means you have to be a practitioner yourself, but I do think it means you do need to have some really personal point of view about the whole thing.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think role modeling curiosity is really important. And so that's on the one hand. And then the other thing, I think, just kind of taking a note from Seth earlier, is that, there is experimentation happening in your organization for sure. So you want to be in a position to nurture and foster that. And in order to really do that, you do need to you need to go back to the first principles of what matters to your business, and to, kind of help guide people to experiment in ways that are actually going to be helpful to your business. Even if you're not going to overhaul all of your workflows and redesign your whole organization as the, first up, you still need to kind of direct people. And so you need a little bit of knowledge of what's going on with AI and how that feels, and to be able to set that context for people in their experimentation. So very good. Look at us, another leadership corner.
All right. Well, hopefully that was helpful.
Okay. So now let's do our wrap up, Meg. So what did you learn today? This was a very different conversation that we had with Seth than some of the others. This was more of a kind of like a ground up, changing hearts and minds kind of conversation, rather than more of kind of the top down look. What did you learn? What did we learn?
Yeah. So where my head is going and what I'm reflecting on is really that I think we're seeing kind of the merging of two different things that both you and I have lived multiple times. The first is this idea of innovation, the design of doing something new, creating something that wasn't there before, and all of the kind of teasing out what's a good idea, what isn't a good idea, some practicing, some, strategic thinking, and then some discarding of things as you go. So all of that distillation, crystallization looks very similar to the strategy and design work that we would do in product. But then you have the other side of it, which is the muscle building, the internal muscle building within an organization for transformation. And this, I feel like a lot of people are talking about the transformation we need for AI is actually the same sort of transformation skills we've always needed, which is helping people and systems and organizations understand where they need to go, build the tools to be able to get there, and to emerge in that new thing with confidence and the ability to grow a business. And so I guess I think I kick it back to you, because when I think about the biggest transformation we've done of late was, at least together, was when you brought me into SuccessFactors. You had already done a lot of that pre-work and were really ripe for doing transformation execution. And I'm just curious, as you think back on those experiences and where AI is going to emerge, what are some of those learnings that we could maybe lean on in this moment?
That's a really good point, Meg. So reflecting back, when I joined SuccessFactors in 2017, it was operating in product silos. And this was based on legacy build and operations and even incentives. But what I saw right away was that customers were demanding a unified solution. So the value creation wheel was just completely broken. It needed to change. And the coordination costs to leverage Sanjeet's book, Reshuffle, they were sky high. And at that time, basically, for a team to enhance their individual project, that was super easy. But building a solution was really, really hard. That was hard work. But it was clear that the market was going to leave us behind if we didn't change our model. And so this sounds very similar to what we're talking about in terms of how we have to move from, human leveraged business models to AI leveraged business models. Very similar. We did change the PM and design functions so that they were embedded in the agile process and had more skin in the game for quality and customer satisfaction, which really were a lot more about integration and consistency than just feature delivery. Like, people had it in their minds that what customers cared about was feature delivery, but what they actually were caring about was integration and consistency. And they couldn't really see that unless they were really embedded in the engineering process. So that was one thing. And then the second thing was that everyone was using a different tracking tool, different Jira tools. So we got everyone on one Jira tool so that we could have, we could be working towards the same goals, beat to the same drum, and have visibility. And then the third thing was that we then got started on creating one product. And we had a specific initiative, which was a new homepage, which I feel like is always the thing where you start. And so the existing homepage was a landing spot for a bunch of separate products at the time. But what we decided to undertake was creating a homepage where everything was unified into a single experience of insights and nudges and tasks. And Meg, I will tell you, it was not easy.
Are you sure?
There was a lot of resistance. There was a lot of doubting of me, a lot of feeling of missed opportunities. Like, and we could have put out like these 10 features if we hadn't been working on this stupid homepage project, right? I'm sure there was a lot of people feeling that way. But we did persist and we did turn that darn flywheel. And in the end, I would say that, what really made that transformation work was being clear and consistent, getting the right leaders in place, celebrating incremental success, and crucially, finding new incentives to make people care about doing the hard thing, because incentives do matter. And what I would say is that those incentives came in the form of customer and sales feedback, because, ultimately product teams, like their highs and lows come with customer and sales feedback, right? So it's not so much like a monetary incentive. It was much more about that emotional incentive. And so that is ultimately what made this transformation a success. And so I would say that all of that same stuff is completely true in the current situation that we're in right now.
I love that. And I will say that the resilience to define and make that kind of a massive transformational shift is not for rookies, but does pay off in the end. So well done, Amy Wilson. Really well done,
Meg. Wow. Well, thanks. I appreciate that. All right. Well, we have had quite a journey today. So shall we say goodbye?
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for all the support and for following us on all the channels. We really appreciate it. And please do continue to send in your Leadership Corner questions. Let's invent the future together, everyone. I believe in us.
Make every day count.